No, okay. So, John, as president of the AGM, could you open, please?
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have a quorum present. We're required to have 50% of the members present in order to have a quorum. And as we don't have that number at present, we will defer the opening of the meeting, the formal opening of the meeting for half an hour. And in the meantime, we've got Nuno Gonçalves from PwC, who is going to give a presentation on the National Recovery Fund. I'm sure I haven't got that name right, but Nuno will fill us in on all of the details. Nuno, please.
Thank you, John. That was close enough. The recovery and resilience plan. I'll try to share my screen. Let's hope technology doesn't let us down. Please tell me if you are right now looking or watching my presentation.
It's there, yes.
Okay, yes. Great. So first of all, on my behalf and on behalf of PwC, thank you very much to the Ipbn for inviting us to participate in the AGM today. PwC is a proud member of the Ipbn, and so we are always happy to share some knowledge and insights, and why not some educated guesses with our fellow members, in particularly with regard to the recovery and resilience plan. So something that has been raising quite a lot of interest in society at the moment. And so I would like to take these few minutes, hopefully not many minutes, to share some information about the plan and our expectations of what the impacts and the functioning of that plan will be. First of all, I would like to know, I would like to emphasize that there are still many uncertainties with regard to the actual functioning of the plan and how the funding is going to get to the beneficiaries. So up to very recently, the President of the Republic was still consulting with economists and business stakeholders with regard to the plan's provisions. The expectation is that by the end of April, so by the end of this month, a draft version of the plan can be sent to the European Commission, to Brussels, to be finalized. And only after that are we going to start seeing some legislative pieces, some legislation on how the plan is going to be materialized. And only after that are we going to be able to have access to some of the instruments and tools and the necessary technological infrastructure that will allow private sector players and private companies to apply for funding and to start receiving some funding. Hopefully, or the initial expectation was that this would all be complete at the end of the second trimester, so the second quarter of the year. And by the end of June, it would already be possible to start accessing some of the funding, or at least start submitting some applications to receive funding. As I was saying earlier, at this time, and taking into account how things are going, I think that's a bit of wishful thinking. If we can have the plan duly implemented by the third trimester, I think that will be a win, quite honestly. And that's when the money will really start trickling down. As I was saying also earlier, government has some privileges that private entities do not have, and I'm sure that many of us saw on the news yesterday that the construction work for the expansion of the Lisbon subway has started. That is a project that is being financed by the Recovery and Resilience Plan, but government has these luxuries. They can start spending the money even before the plan has been finalized and put to action. Unfortunately, private sector stakeholders do not have such luxuries. But so, moving on. And let's go a bit beyond the time span of the Recovery and Resilience Plan, because the Recovery and Resilience Plan goes from 2021 to 2023. But it's still it's important to highlight that for the 2021-2027 period, the European Commission and the member states are going to have at their avail the largest economic assistance program that has ever been put together. This happens because, in addition to the normal business as usual multi-annual financial framework, so that comes from the regular EU budget for the 21-27 period, we now add the Next Generation EU program, which is a one-off measure that was created to combat the specific impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic difficulties that were created due to that pandemic. So out of those 750 billion euros that comprise the Next Generation EU, 390 billion are going to be handed out to the member states in the form of subsidies, and 360 billion in the form of loans. I think we can all remember that this was a topic of contention at the time the program was being agreed upon. Some countries were quite adamant about not being as generous in terms of subsidies. Others had the opposite opinion. So this was the compromise that we finally came to. So as I was saying, the recovery and resilience, the Next Generation EU plan has a budget of 750 billion. 670 billion are going to come from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Just for the record, the remaining 80 billion will go to reinforcing already existing EU assistance schemes. But the Recovery and Resilience Facility is something new, and it's going to have a budget of 670 billion, of which Portugal will receive 14 billion worth of subsidies and 15.7 billion worth of loans. Our government says that hopefully the subsidies are going to be used entirely, but only 2.7 billion of the loan funding will actually be executed by the government. Let's see how things really happen. In order to use the money and execute the budget from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, countries need to develop and put together their own national recovery and resilience plan. So that's what I was saying earlier. Portugal is still working on its recovery and resilience plan. Hopefully, we're coming to the end of that development work, and we will see the practical impact of the plan, maybe in late June or during the third trimester of the year. So what can we expect from that plan, and what do we already know at this time? Well, we know that the plan is structured around three pillars: resilience, climate transition, and digital transition. Resilience, obviously, because it comes as a response to the pandemic and to the economic crisis. Climate transition and digital transitions have long been priorities of the European Commission and the member states. So it makes sense that this extra funding can also be used to support those two priorities. These three pillars include 19 components. So components are going to be investment areas that are deemed strategic and important to combat the pandemic and to foster the economy overall. And within those 19 components, there will be 77 investment areas to be financed by the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So a few thoughts about what we can expect concerning this plan. A higher funding rate of up to 100%, and higher compared to what? Up to now, most of the money that comes to Portugal from the European Commission through the European Structural and Investment Funds is used to support projects by the government and by private entities, but the financing rates never reach 100%. So all beneficiaries need to have some capital of their own to co-finance the projects. Under the Recovery and Resilience Plan, we are expecting to see a change in that. So it is probable and likely that some of the initiatives or actions financed by the plan are going to have a 100% funding rate. Also, there might be the inclusion of the possibility to support projects in non-convergence regions. What is a non-convergence region? This is EU talk for regions in the EU that are as wealthy or wealthier than the EU average in terms of GDP per capita. So in mainland Portugal, we have only two of those, Lisbon and the Algarve. And for that reason, those two regions are normally very limited and very conditioned in accessing European funds. So any investments taking place in Lisbon or the Algarve are usually constrained. under regular multi-annual financial framework funding. Under the Recovery and Resilience Plan, we hope to see a change in that, and we hope to see an end to this negative discrimination. Obviously, there's a focus on climate transition and digital transition. I mean, two of the main pillars are those exact two things. And one thing that I'm always a bit unhappy to mention, but it is the case, the plan is mainly geared towards public administration. That means that most of the money is going to be spent by government and government authorities. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. If you take a look at the resilience pillar, we see that there's a focus on the national health services, on housing, on social responses, and on eliminating pockets of poverty. So obviously, this money needs to be spent by the government, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some opportunities for direct financing for private sector players. I mean direct financing because obviously if the government is spending money, a lot of business opportunities can come for private sector players. Direct financing means that the private sector players, the businesses, the companies can access the funding directly to finance their own investment projects. Also, one thing that I would like to point out is that even in the fraction of the funding that is aimed towards private sector companies, there is a strong bias to favor industry and industrial investments. That does not mean that services companies or any other companies are excluded from accessing the funds. That just means that we're going to have to be a bit more, let's say, creative in accessing those funds. And finally, as I was mentioning, the rollout, the initial rollout was expected for the second quarter of 2021. That at the time being, that might be a bit optimistic, in all honesty. So out of these 19 components, we at PwC, together with our partners and our clients, we have seen emergence in interest in 3 of them. And rightfully so, because these 3 components are the ones that are more promising with regards to direct financing of private sector investment projects. And these are the investment and innovation component, the industry decarbonization component, and the enterprise 4.0 component. So what I would suggest is that we take a more detailed look at each of these 3 components and see what they're all about. So the first one, the investment and innovation component, actually includes an investment priority, which is the mobilizing or green agendas for reindustrialization. What are these agendas? Well, they are alliances for industrial and technological development, and they are comprised of all sorts of stakeholders, including businesses, public research organizations, higher education institutions, and others, including business associations. So in principle, the Ipbn can be part of one of these alliances, one of these agendas, and be a beneficiary of one of this type of funding. So what is really the idea here? The idea is that these alliances are bottom-up initiatives, industry-driven initiatives or stakeholder-driven initiatives within specific economic sectors that aim to improve the productive fabric of the country towards more technology intensive, towards more capital intensive, and towards more sophisticated products, sophisticated industrial products. So the idea here is that in a sector, let's say life sciences, some major players in the life sciences sector come together, they form an alliance, they take a deep look at that specific sector in Portugal, come up with a strategic plan to boost the competitiveness of the industry in that sector, to boost the technological content of the products and services provided by that sector, present that strategic program, and become recognized as a mobilizing or a green agenda for reindustrialization. If that happens, there is €1 billion available to finance future projects driven and implemented by that agenda. Well, when I say €1 billion, it's overall. The initial expectation of the government is that between 5 and 10 of these agendas will be financed. So that means that each agenda will have access to a pool of money between 100 and 200 million euros. How is this going to work specifically? That's another of the things that we do not know at the moment. What we do know is that the agendas are going to have to include a strong component of highly skilled job creation. So the government expects to create 15,000 highly skilled jobs stemming directly from these agendas. That the agendas can make the economic sector or the value chain more attractive to foreign direct investment, and that there is a coherence, or that synergies can be created between the funding from the Recovery and Resilience Facility and future funding from the multi-annual financial framework. So I don't know, some people here might be familiarized with what happened in Portugal 10 or 12 years ago with the creation of the competitiveness clusters. So the mechanics is going to be about the same. So it's an industry-driven initiative in which industry stakeholders come together, they construct and they develop a strategic action plan for their specific sector, and then they're going to have access to 100 or 200 million euros to finance specific projects to implement that strategic plan for the sector. I can tell you that from a PwC standpoint, this is the component of the plan that has been raising the most interest by our clients. Obviously, from industrial clients, but the industrial clients and, let's say, the anchor firms, the firms around which the agendas are going to be built, are going to have to build an ecosystem of partners around them, and that might include all sorts of stakeholders: services companies, technology companies, law firms, consulting, etc., etc., etc. So there is an opportunity here. It's not really a free-for-all, but there is an opportunity to finance different projects that pertain to different actors and different stakeholders, provided that they have an expanded benefit and an expanded impact on a given economic sector. The next component that we think is relevant for direct funding of private sector companies is industry decarbonization. And I know that the Ipbn membership does not include many industrial players, so it's mostly companies in the services sector. But I assume that some of these companies might be involved in technology services, consulting, the green economy, etc. And so they can seize business opportunities that come from the funding that there is available for industry decarbonization. So what's going to happen here is that industrial players are going to have direct financing to implement measures within their activity that lead to reduced carbon footprint. There are four main investment areas here, and the first one is probably the most important: low carbon processes and technologies, in which new or improved processes, products, and business models in view of decarbonization will be financing, as well as new equipment and new process for new technologies. So what we read from this is that in this particular component and in this particular investment area, industrial players are going to have access to funding to finance CapEx expenses. And obviously, this is always something that raises a lot of interest in industry stakeholders. And when an industry stakeholder makes a CapEx investment, there's a great deal of opportunities for suppliers and for providers to also seize business opportunities. Also, another important investment area is energy efficiency measures in industry. So this is really about adopting new technologies, new methodologies, new ways of doing things that will lead to more energy savings and energy efficiency. So it's more acquisition of services and expertise than CapEx. And also, one thing that is quite relevant is the integration of renewable energy sources and energy storage, and particularly the incorporation of hydrogen and renewable gases in industry, especially in sectors with limited options for electrification. So, as you know, there is a national strategy for hydrogen, and the inclusion of hydrogen as an energy source in industry is one of the priorities of the Recovery and Resiliency Plan. So industrial companies aiming to invest in means and technologies and equipment to produce hydrogen, to generate energy for self-consumption and for incorporation in the grid will be financed. And finally, there's an investment area that is based upon capacity building and development of information tools. At this moment, we're not really sure what this entails, but it's mostly, but we believe it's mostly intangible investments. And we are not entirely sure how much of this money is actually going to go to private sector players. So this might be some overall guidance documents and guidance pieces and orientation that might stem directly from government policy and not necessarily industrial activity. And finally, the last component of the Recovery and Resilience Plan that we think might be relevant for companies is the Enterprise 4.0 component. And we really think this one is going to be somewhat democratic in the sense that many companies from many sectors and many walks of life will be eligible to benefit from this support. But it's going to be geared mainly towards SMEs. And there are three particularly important investment areas that will be made available for private sector players. The first one is the digital capacity building in businesses. And this basically means that Ipbn, the Portuguese Institute for Small and Medium Enterprise and Innovation, is going to set up 2 training programs for company workers, for private sector company workers, to increase their digital skills. So, and obviously this training is going to come at no cost for companies. It's going to be financed by Ipbn, and they can put their workers through this training in order to increase their digital skills. The next priority investment that I think is much more interesting is digital transition in businesses. And in this particular priority investment area, we believe there's going to be direct funding of company projects to help them in their digitalization processes, and by assisting them in promoting the uses of technologies such as artificial intelligence, analytics, and cloud computing to trigger a series of behavioral changes in those companies. So process automation, value chain design and management, e-commerce, etc. So under this investment area, most likely SMEs, this is exclusive for SMEs, are going to have access to funding that's going to finance their projects in digital transition. And we do not see at this time that there will be any strong limitations to the sector of those companies, so to the specific sector in which they operate. So this is another source of direct funding that we can see as very relevant. And finally, fostering digital transition in businesses. Here too, we believe that this is going to be an effort to create conditions to implement the investment area above, so the digital transition in businesses. So in this third one, probably the opportunities for direct financing of private sector players are going to be somewhat limited. This is just to assist with contextual costs and the business environment in the country. So these three are, the way we see it, the main components that are going to make funds available for direct financing of private sector company projects. This is an educated guess, obviously, because all of this is not yet written in stone. It has not been set and is in no way defined at the moment. But taking a look at the text of the plan as it is right now, this is our best opinion about that matter. That's why, and I'm coming near the end. I like to end these small expositions on a more positive note, which is, even if the Recovery and Resilience Plan isn't everything you expected it to be, certainly there are some important limitations to it. By the end of the year, the new multi-annual financial framework is going to come into force. So we are coming out of the 2014-2020 multi-annual financial framework, and we're going to enter the 2021-2027 financial framework. And these financial frameworks are always more democratic and always give private companies and private businesses greater freedom and tolerance to develop and to construct their own investment projects the way they see fit, with less strings attached, and apply for funding to support those projects. So, in very briefly about the multi-annual financial framework, what can we expect about it? There are going to be 3 thematic operational programs in mainland Portugal. They are going to be on the issues of demographics and inclusion. So this is mostly going to be for social investments in inequality, social exclusion, etc. Then there's going to be a theme of innovation and digital transition. And this is where we can see the financing of investment projects by private companies taking place. So there's probably going to be a large chunk of the available money that is going to be channeled for this. And then there's the theme program or the thematic program of climate transition and sustainability in the use of resources, which also might present some opportunities for private sector financing. Although, if we are to look at the program that has just been phased out, it had a similar thematic priority, and it didn't provide that much money for private stakeholders. So, but let's hope things will be better this time. Overall, Portugal will receive 33.6 billion euros for the 2021 to 2027 programming period. This is a substantial increase from the 25 billion that we got for the 2014-2020 program. There might be some restrictions imposed on large enterprises, particularly in accessing financing for productive investment projects. This means that large enterprises wishing to, let's say, build a factory or build a major hotel or something like that will probably be very limited in the type of funding they have access to. But at the same time, we are expecting, or we are hoping to see, a redefinition of the SME concept and or eligibility of small and mid-cap companies. This means that large enterprises might be excluded, but we might be looking at a new concept of what a large enterprise is. Okay, so in that way, some companies that currently do not fit the SME standard will still have access to financing in the next multi-annual financial framework. Also, we're expecting to see some positive changes in the regional breakdown of the country, so that low population density regions and regions that have been affected especially severely by the pandemic and the economic crisis can have better conditions. And we'll probably see some calls for applications being launched late this year, or more realistically earlier next year. I think this is pretty much everything I had to share about the multi-annual financial framework. It is also pretty much everything I had to share about the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Well, of course, everything at this time, obviously open and welcoming of questions. So thank you for your attention. I hope it hasn't been very boring, and I invite everybody to join the discussion.
Thank you very much indeed, Nuno. That was indeed most interesting. You've covered a lot of ground, and I think there must be a lot of doubts and questions coming out of this. Regrettably, we do have to proceed with the agenda for the annual general meeting. And what I would suggest is that perhaps if you wouldn't mind sending a copy of your slides to Arnold for him to distribute to the members, and then they can perhaps follow up directly with you to perhaps try to identify further business opportunities. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you very much, and to thank PwC for this presentation. It was most interesting, and it's good to see that there is some money available to Portugal in order to recover from, at least partially, from what we've been going through for the last year or so. And we look forward with optimism to the future. Once again, thank you to Nuno.
Thank you, John. And I took a bit more time than was supposed to. I apologize for that deeply, and I'm available for any follow-up questions that there might be afterwards.
Yeah,
Thanks.
very good. It's very difficult to summarize something as complex and broad-ranging as this in the time available to you. So apologies for that limitation, but we must press on. Aoife, as we have now come to 4:30, we still don't have a quorum, regrettably, but we do need to revert to the main agenda, and I invite Aoife to continue with the agenda as presented. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. Nuno, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. And I learned a lot more than I expected to, which is brilliant. I am going to, without any hesitation, get started on our presentation for this afternoon. As you can imagine, is that showing the screen? Is that showing?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Presentation. Oh yeah, great. Okay.
Can you? Yeah.
What do I need to do? Sorry.
Yeah, can you put it on the full screen?
Should be full screen, is it not?
We have
No.
the notes.
Hang on.
Yeah, we see your notes.
Stop share, hang on. But that's the way it's been set up, so I never changed it, sorry. If I do slideshow, sorry, bear with me 1 second.
You should be able.
Yeah.
It was fine. You just needed to put it on the full.
Sorry, guys. Is that not showing as a slideshow now?
No.
It's not showing at all.
Hang on.
Maybe you can get a grant from the recovery
Yeah.
fund to
It's coming.
help you.
Yeah, I obviously need a recovery fund too. Can I switch that thing off? No? Does anyone
Yeah,
know?
that's perfect.
It's good. Yeah, we have it now. We have it now. Carry on.
But okay, I don't know what it's doing. It's not doing what I expected it to do anyway. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. Apologize for the messing at the beginning of this. Here's our agenda. We're going to start with the review of the activities of the association in 2020. We're going to approve the financial statements for the year ended 31st of December 2020, approve the budget for 2021, going to elect new members of the association, elect the board of re-elect the members of the board of directors, re-elect the chair, and re-elect the fiscal board. As you can imagine, it was a bit of a challenging year. We are still who we were then, which is a community of people who want to explore opportunities, partnerships, and collaborations with other business people in Portugal or in Ireland. The Ipbn remains the only independent organisation recognised by the Portuguese and Irish governments and state organisations that provide such cross-country facilitation, such as Enterprise Ireland and ICEP. We're very proud of that position, actually, and it has paid off very well. We are getting a lot of interest from people coming through those organisations, and we are able to refer people around to them. So it's a really important part of our network. Our mission is to grow the economic activity between Ireland and Portugal by creating business opportunities for members. It's very hard to see how that may have panned out in 2020. Obviously, tourism is one of the biggest exports from Portugal to Ireland, and there is a limited amount of it going the other way. And that clearly just didn't happen in the last year. But I think there has been anecdotally many other activities happening on the ground, and that continues to be our aim into the future, even if the pandemic has dented our what would you call it, momentum ever so slightly. So we continue to run networks mostly online at the moment, obviously, although we will be getting back to in-person as soon as we can. To keep our members informed, we profile our members on our website and on our LinkedIn, and now Facebook as well. We invite industry leaders to share their knowledge and experience, which enhances the knowledge and experience that people in the network have and tells them, such as Nuno, what's going on in the world and what they may have access to, which they didn't have previously. And it also helps people to connect with each other. We promote our members' activities, their products and their services on our digital platforms. We create new business opportunities for our members with one-to-one introductions. We assist Irish entrants to the Portuguese market and vice versa. And finally, we help, as I mentioned previously, government agencies enhance trade links between the two countries. So 2020, the year that was, well, we started it off very, very, very enthusiastically with Global Shares winning our Business Success Award. And then we moved to Dublin. And at that stage, the pandemic was making itself felt. Our event in Dublin was around about the 14th of February. And we were already getting the feeling that this pandemic was a bit more serious than we had thought. The first Living and Working in Portugal event in Dublin was a terrific success. We had over 250 people attend, and I think everybody really enjoyed it and they learned a lot. Just our last event that literally happened on the in real life on the eve of the pandemic was Dr. Easkey Britton was invited to present on conservation and her experiences in the world of competitive surfing, obviously, which is an interest in Portugal, but also she was able to talk about much more than that in terms of her experience of going into rural economies and working with women around the world. Really interesting conversation. And then our sustainability event was cancelled as a result of the pandemic. We went online. And between March and June, we ran 17 webinars and we got our members to talk about what they were doing. We certainly had expertise in terms of presentations on legal affairs, accounting affairs, workspace affairs, health and safety, occupational safety. We tried to address the concerns of our members. And then obviously one of the concerns of our members was that they were not able to meet people any longer. So we handed a lot of the events over to members themselves to tell us what they were doing and what they were, how they needed help during the pandemic. This continued, unfortunately, into the second part of the year. We resumed after summer, such as the summer was, and we had planned to have an event in the centre of Lisbon, but that didn't pass. We just had 4 of us in the end that we streamed online. But it was the first event that we did hybrid, where we had an online audience, but we had people in person having a conversation, and it worked out really quite well. We moved our members meet members online, and we also had a conversation with the Dean of Nova University, Daniel Trassa, which was extremely interesting. We finished the year with an overview by His Excellency Ambassador Ralph Victory, who summed up, I think, the feeling of the year, which was like, what was that all about? But we did it anyway, and we got through it. There was some significant highlights in terms of being able to keep going and keep our membership engaged throughout that time. But I do have to say it was a challenge. It is very difficult to create continuous online engagement, but I think we did our best. The early part of Q1 in 2021, obviously the pandemic, if we had thought it was bad in 2020, it was truly shocking in January 2021. So we continued to, with events supporting SMEs in Portugal. We moved the event that we had run in Dublin in 2020 online, and actually it was really successful. I think we had about 200 people nearly at every single event, even though it was online. We introduced masterclasses for the first time, particularly in the areas of public speaking and SEO, search engine optimization, etc. And we ran our St. Patrick's Day Sustainability Conference. So despite the pandemic, the Ipbn has been out there doing what it does best for its members, which is working on their behalf and promoting their interests and what they're doing and keeping them informed of what's happening in the world around them, such as it is. And that brings us to membership. Obviously, this organization is for the members, and we were really lucky to now have 137 active members by the end of 2021. Our renewal rate stayed above 70% and 75%, which is really good at the best of times, and I think was astonishing in circumstances in the middle of the pandemic, particularly when so many people's businesses were so badly affected. We welcomed 58 new members, and our total membership is split between principally Lisbon with 64, 41 in the Algarve, and a growing number of people in Ireland who, as they look towards Portugal to do business, have joined with us. I know there were some people who were in Ireland that were hoping to move to Portugal this year, but it hasn't happened just yet. We keep our fingers crossed for next year. So, one of the key things that happened last year, and we got funding from the Irish government, it's really important to say we did retain and actually increase our grant funding from the government, which is a recognition for the Ipbn of the work that we have done. And we were able to move Arnold to a full-time role at the end of last year, and we brought Ellis Dixon on. Ellis's role is now to focus on the content management for the network. Everything, as we have seen, is now online, and I do not see that changing anytime soon. So Ellis will focus on sharing members' short stories, sharing articles, improving website design, and increasing the traffic to the Ipbn site, growing our LinkedIn following, which is at 1,350 at the moment and growing daily. And she started our Facebook page, and she is keeping our newsletter subscribers, of which we have more than 550, informed of the new members joining the network, what's going on the network. And obviously she also helps Arnold, which I didn't say, with loading up all of the content that we generate from each members event to share with our members into the future, so that it's always there and it's alive all the time. So the year ahead, we continue to provide added values to the members. You know, as I said, Ellis is a huge bonus to us to be able to have her on board with all of the content marketing. And Arnold is very much going to focus on member events and driving membership and interaction with members as we go forward. We're going to grow those connections and interactions between members, new and existing. And we're going to go, in whatever way we can, focus on bringing back online events and blending with the I'm going to reverse that. We're going to bring back in-person events and blend them with online events so that we can incorporate more of the members into each and every event. One of the things that came out of this year that was interesting was how much greater our reach was online, in that we can have people from the Algarve, from Porto, from Lisbon and from Ireland in on our events, which obviously when you're in person, you can't do, but you can do it if you run hybrid events of people being live, but also streaming. So we are going to look more closely at how we do that into the future. We continue to hope, we set 2 dates for our launch in Porto. It still hasn't happened. We have high hopes for the end of this year, and we will also be running another energy conference later on in the year. And we, I'm afraid, have to search for a new chair of the board in Ipbn in 2022, because this is my last year. I will have done it for 4 years at this point, and it is time for someone else to step into the role. So if you're thinking of it, give us a shout and let us know. Has anybody any questions about any of the activities and events that were done in the last year? No? Okay, so we'll move on to the slightly more formal bit. Can everybody see the figures here on the screen? Yep, okay. So if you can see my mouse here, we had a grant of 14,950 from the Irish government in 2019, and that increased to 19,250. And that is how we've managed to bring Arnold on as a full-time employee, and also have been able to recruit Ellis to her role as content and digital marketer. We had an increase in our, we had an increase. Something wrong with that. I'm not sure what it is, but there is. Our income there is sponsorship and membership fees. I think that's the way it is. That's what it's phrased as. And obviously our expenses then, which are, you know, the operating costs of running business, are in there. Sorry. I'm finding it hard to see this. I need glasses. Bear with me 1 second, guys. So our profit before depreciation, financing and expenses was €11,699. I think it's really important to state here that this is higher. We don't expect to run a profit. We're not we're a not-for-profit organization, but a huge part of obviously running our expenses in general are that we run them in person, and that we have expenses associated with operating it. And normally they would cut into some of the cash and the figures available to us. And that didn't really happen last year, although we did increase some costs relative to hosting events online. It was very little compared to what it costs in real life to host those events. Our balance sheet, obviously, we have no outstanding loans. So our balance sheet is just simply a reflection of income and what we have on deposit in the bank. Pedro, could I get you to comment on these? Because you can comment more knowledgeably than I can on what we're seeing here, if I could actually see it in the first place.
Thank you. No, certainly. I will, well, at the time you described the Ipbn activities in 2020, you basically explain what happened with our figures during this year. But in summary, I would say that, yeah, at the middle of 2020 or at the end of the second quarter after the first lockdown, we urged to control the situation or to avoid any kind of problems during the 2020, since we're not aware what was going to expect till the end of the year. So we're very careful on the expense side. And I think we had in Ipbn what I call the Peter and Wolf effect, which is we're so afraid what could happen, but at the end it was a little bit better than expected, at least regarding our figures. We are able to improve, in fact, our grant from the Irish embassy government. And on the other hand, we're also able to control our costs. Since our memberships and also subsidies, or let's say sponsorships we got during the year were more or less stable. In fact, we're able to increase our members bases, and that's quite challenging since we move very quickly to a full digital networking activity. At the end, the results, as you mentioned, are positive, are even better than the previous year. Not because we like to be a profit organization, but because we have things under control and we were able, in a way, to control the expenses. And that's why our balance sheet improved a little bit. We have more funds, more cash at the end of the year compared with the previous year, which gives us some comfort for the current year. And this was a result of a very quick and agile transformation. Let's call it digital transformation, the jargon of the new times, that we're able to do during this year. So I think that in general terms, 2020, and I think that's my opinion, the fiscal board's opinion, they accomplished what we defined and was expected at the beginning of the year, and also of the budget of the year. And just to finalize, and give me just 30 seconds more, I'd like to, we'll look to the budget 2021 in a few minutes from you, of course, but certainly we would like also as a fiscal board to do a kind of, a couple of comments that I'll ask to the board to allow us to do in the later stage. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Pedro. So the next slide then is what the Ipbn budget is in this year, and this was approved by the board. We had thought at the time when we put this budget together in January, when it was approved in December, January, that we would be already back into real life events. That hasn't happened, and I think some of the stuff is a little bit reflected in this, in things like event sponsorship and membership subscriptions. But as you will see, in general, the income is matched by expenditure, particularly because we intend to have events in real life again, which are significantly more expensive than digital events. I would like to open the floor to comments on anything that people have seen in these 3 pages of financial reports. Does anyone have any comments that they'd like to make, or any observations that they'd like to make?
Eva, can I just ask one question?
Sure, Brian.
Just relating to this whole thing between virtual events versus face-to-face events, yeah?
Yeah.
I know I've just heard this from lots of people anecdotally, and I'm sure lots of others have, that most people anecdotally seem to prefer face-to-face events. However, yeah, there's a balance with that, because clearly from a point of view of being cost effective, the virtual ones are better from the Ipbn point of view, in that, from a cost perspective. But I wonder, is it worth kind of just polling the membership, because different people might have different views on this in terms of what each individual finds more useful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly worth doing, Brian. I would agree with you that when you talk to people, people are dying to meet in person. It is significantly more difficult to build a meaningful relationship in a group situation digitally. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's no standing there having a coffee or, you know, chewing the fat, because that space is not available to you digitally. But as you say, there is a significant difference in costs between running events online and running events in person. I mean, if you're going to in person, even just paying for the coffee is a couple of €100 before you've paid for the venue or anything like that. But does that mean that we shouldn't spend that money? No, it doesn't. I think, you know, if it's a bit of a, this is why I say we sort of do need to look at hybrid events, that if people want to participate from anywhere, that they will expect to be able to jump online and participate, but they also want to participate in real life. So it is one of those ideas that I think we're going to have to pursue, the hybrid model. What do you think, Brian?
I think Eva, no, I don't disagree with you at all. Yeah, I just mean that, you know, how to say, we're moving into a period where things are obviously going to change again some way, whether we like it or not. Yeah, but I think there's also an opportunity to kind of, how to say, tailor some of our thinking, because I think for me personally, I'd absolutely 1000% agree with you if you're talking about meeting people for the first time. Yeah. But after that, it's not necessarily as important. Now, different people will have different views on that and what's effective for them, what isn't. I'm just thinking if we did some kind of little simple mini poll of that to get different people's views, it might be, and maybe this depends on all the different things that we all do, as to what's more useful for one person versus the next. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think the other thing, Brian, is that certain events work way better in bigger settings, like the sustainability. It was really good, and we had amazing content, and it would have been very difficult to bring 4 people together in, you know, 5 people, the 6 people that we had in real life this year, obviously. But if we had managed to do that, instead of having 30 or 40 on each presentation, we would have had 200 people in a room all the time. And that would have been a different energy and a bit of different dynamic, you know? So I think we'll have to pick our events. I would hate to see digital events go and return strictly to in person. I think there's a balance to be struck. Does anybody else have any comments or views that they'd like to share on that idea?
Picking the Brian idea or concept about hybrid or personal or digital events, I think, and now that we are looking to the budget figures, we have some risks regarding that, because if you are not able to go to the personal or more hybrid/personal events, we run the risk to not achieve the sponsorships we are looking for in our budget, because it's normal that people will invest more in sponsorship if the events are personal, let's be honest, because of course, not digital ones, you can also sponsor and advertise and so on, but it's normally it's the investment is higher if you have that kind of event. So what Brian is saying can have also an impact, in fact, in our activity, but also in our 21 budget. So I'm talking about 25K we have here on sponsorship that are a lot depending on that, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, in that case, I recommend the budget is approved for the meeting, and also the annual accounts for 2020 have been approved. Anybody disagree? No. Okay, great. So next item on the agenda is the election of new members to the IPBN. They can be found at the following list. I was going to share the page, but it is 137 members and it is a bit difficult to share. So if you don't mind, I'd ask you to just take it on faith from us that these members are all worthy individuals who should be and will actually contribute significantly to the value that they get from their membership in the IPBN. Anybody disagree? No. Okay. And the next thing we have to do is to approve the board members. In the first instance, can we have any disagreement for the reappointment of me as chair of the IPBN board? Nobody disagrees? No? Okay, so I am deemed reappointed as board member, chair of the board. Susan Cabeceres, Mario Gago, Felipe Santiago, Diogo Eva Cruz, Pedro Barata, Richard Hickson, Jeffrey Graham, and Sharon Farrell has an honorary position as the chair of the Algarve Committee as a board members. Does anyone disagree with the reappointment of those people to the board of the IPBN for 2021? Nope, nobody disagrees. Okay, and in that case, we also suggest that Pedro Teixeira, John Duggan and Greg Purcell maintain their roles on the fiscal board of the IPBN for 2021. Does anyone disagree? Okay, so Pedro, John and Greg, you've been re-elected to the fiscal board. And then finally, I think that brings us to the end of the formal end of the AGM. Please, please, please contact Arnold or Ellis if you have information about your organization you'd like to share, if you had insightful information you'd like to share, if you have ideas for events that you think would work for the IPBN, if you had feedback to give on any of our events. It would be great if you could bring it up with Arnold and Ellis, as they are really keen to help the membership and help our members do business. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation, guys.
Could I just intervene for a moment?
Yeah.
Just before we bring things to a conclusion. On behalf of the members, I would like to thank Aoife for her continuing energy and fantastic contribution to the success of the organization. We wouldn't be at all where we are today without that continuing contribution by Aoife. And I'd also like to put in a word for Arnold and for Ellis, who have shown equal energy and determination during a very difficult year. We owe them also a vote of thanks.
Yes, I second. Particularly the thanks for Arnold and Ellis. It has been an extremely difficult year, especially for Arnold trying to run events online. And I think you've done a great job. And Ellis, you've already made an impact in your short time with us. So thank you. And thank you for the kind words, John. Much appreciated.
Here, here.
Aoife, it's Tom here in the embassy. Can you hear
Tom.
me?
Yeah, we can.
Listen, sincere apologies. I was stuck on another briefing, VC, and I'm just coming in at the end there. Also, I would like to apologise on behalf of Ralph. Ralph had to go to Porto today on presidency-related stuff, so he sends his apologies. I would just like to echo John's words for all your work, Aoife, and the work of the board, and again to Arnold and Elsa. I was actually this morning, I was going through your assessment of the funding, so that has to be back in Dublin by the end of next week. But I would just like to congratulate everybody on the work that they've done throughout the year, and really appreciate it. And again, apologies for it's just during the presidency. I just got stuck on another VC. I had to be there, so sincere apologies about that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Tom. Much appreciated. And listen, Tom, a huge thanks. It's been mentioned twice already, and you may have missed it, but the funding from the Department of Foreign Affairs is essential to the operation of the IPBN, and your work and Ralph's work in terms of getting that over the line for us every year is really sincerely appreciated.
And Aoife, we mustn't forget that certain man who's been so useful and helpful and gone above and beyond and did everything he possibly can is retiring soon. So this might be the last AGM that he might be attending. So we must wish Tom Redmond all the very best for the next exciting part of his life. And thanks for everything, Tom.
Thanks very much, Greg. Maybe I might set something up in Ireland. As the IPBN, maybe a branch there.
That's it. Yeah.
When I get back.
Tom, you can help. You're heading to Clonakilty. You can join Global Shares. They'd love to have you.
I'd love to be on board there as well. first port to call. First port to call.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings the exactly on time at 5 o'clock. That brings our AGM for 2021 to a close. Does anybody else have anything to add before we sign off on the 2021 AGM? No? Okay. Thank you all so much for your participation, for your attendance. It really is appreciated. The members make this organisation as good as it is, and I do appreciate all of your time and effort that you have put in, particularly in the challenge of the last year. It's been fantastic. I look forward to seeing some of you, or if not all of you, in real life in the very near future. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.